The Grand Assembly Hall on Desert Prime was the largest building in the known galaxy, and it had stood for 12,000 years as a symbol of order and unity among the stars. 47 species had gathered here to make laws, settle disputes, and shape the fate of civilizations across 1,000,000 worlds. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the massive doors and felt the weight of 100 alien eyes upon her. She was the only human in the room, and she had never felt more alone in her entire life. The hall stretched upward for what seemed like forever, with platforms floating at different levels where delegates from each member species sat in judgment. Some of these beings had ruled the stars when humanity was still learning to make fire, and they looked down at her with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. High Arbiter Varthelion of the Sithrani Collective stood at the central podium, his long silver robes flowing around his thin blue body. He had 4 arms and eyes that glowed with a cold yellow light, and when he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "We are gathered here today to discuss the human problem," he announced, and Elena felt her hands tighten into fists at her sides. She had known this day was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud still made her blood run cold. The charges were read one by one, and each one felt like a knife in her heart. Humanity had been a provisional member of the Galactic Concord for only 63 years. Barely a moment in the long history of these ancient civilizations. But in that short time, they had apparently committed countless crimes against the natural order of things. They expand too quickly, Varthelion declared, his yellow eyes fixed on Elena with obvious hatred. In just 6 decades, they have colonized 42 worlds and shown no signs of slowing down. Elena wanted to ask what was wrong with that, but she held her tongue and waited. "They adapt technology too aggressively," another delegate added. This one, a massive creature covered in brown fur with tusks jutting from its lower jaw. "They took our FTL drive designs and improved them by 30% in only 10 years. This is unnatural and dangerous." A third voice joined in, belonging to a being that looked like a floating jellyfish made of purple light. "They ask too many questions, and they fear nothing. When we told them not to explore the void regions, they sent 3 expeditions anyway." Elena remembered those expeditions. 2 of them had come back with incredible discoveries that had advanced human science by centuries, and the third had found a new habitable planet that now housed 2 million people. "They terraformed 7 worlds without proper environmental permits," Varthelion continued, his voice growing louder with each accusation. "They breed like insects and consume resources at an alarming rate. They do not know their place." That last phrase hung in the air like poison, and Elena finally understood what this was really about. It was not about permits or protocols or even resources. It was about fear, pure and simple. These ancient species had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, and they had built a system that kept everything in careful balance. Every race knew its place, every civilization grew at an acceptable pace, and nothing ever changed too quickly. Then humanity had arrived, and they had refused to play by the rules. "We propose full exile," Varthelion announced, and a murmur swept through the assembly. "Earth and all human colonies will be expelled from Concord space immediately. All trade agreements will be cancelled, all treaties will be nullified, and all humans will be pushed beyond the frontier veil into the uncharted regions." Elena knew what lay beyond the frontier veil. Nothing but empty space, dead stars, and the cold darkness between galactic arms. No supply lines, no allies. No, it was a death sentence dressed up in legal language. "We will now vote," Varthelion said, and holographic displays appeared above each species platform. One by one the votes came in, glowing red for exile and blue for mercy. Red. 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 Elena watched as the numbers climbed, and she thought about the 12 billion humans scattered across the stars. She thought about the children who had been born on colony worlds and had never seen Earth. She thought about the scientists and artists and farmers and soldiers who had built a civilization among the stars. Red. A few votes came in blue, and Elena made careful note of which species had chosen mercy. The Voss, a race of tall gray beings with kind eyes, voted against Exile. The Kethrani, small furry creatures known for their wisdom, also voted blue. 7 other species joined them in dissent, but it was not enough. The final count appeared in burning letters above the central podium. 38 votes for Exile. 9 votes against the motion carries, Verthelion announced, and he could not hide the satisfaction in his voice. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Concord, effective immediately. You have 90 standard days to remove all humans from Concord space. The assembly waited for Elena's response. They expected anger, perhaps even tears. Some of them probably hoped she would beg for mercy, so they could feel powerful as they denied her. Instead, Ambassador Elena Vasquez smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a sad smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been given exactly what they wanted. And the sight of it made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. "We accept your terms," she said. And her voice was calm and clear. Verthelion blinked his yellow eyes in surprise. "You accept without protest?" "Without protest," Elena confirmed, already gathering her documents. "We will begin evacuation immediately. You will have no further trouble from humanity." She turned to leave, then paused and looked back at the assembly one last time. "To those 9 species who voted for us today, I want you to know that humans have long memories. We remember our enemies, but we also remember our friends." She walked out of the chamber without looking back, and the massive doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder. Verthelion stood at his podium, surrounded by his allies, and he should have felt victorious. They had just eliminated the greatest threat to galactic stability, and they had done it without firing a single shot. But something about Elena's smile bothered him, and he could not shake the feeling that he had just made a terrible mistake. In her shuttle, leaving the Prime, Elena finally allowed herself to relax. She pulled out a secure communicator and sent a single coded message to Earth. "Green light. Begin Operation Exodus immediately." Within hours, the largest migration in human history would begin. 12 billion people would pack their belongings, board their ships, and fly into the unknown darkness beyond the frontier veil. The Concord thought they were sending humanity to die. They had no idea they were setting them free. Elena looked out the window at the stars and thought about everything that was to come. The hard years of survival, the desperate struggle to build something new, the sacrifices that would have to be made. But she also thought about the possibilities. No more restrictions on technology, no more limits on expansion, no more ancient bureaucrats telling humans what they could and could not do. The galaxy had just told humanity to leave. And humans were not the kind of species that needed to be told twice, whatever came next. Elena knew one thing for certain. When humanity returned to Concord space, they would not be begging for readmission. They would be coming back on their own terms. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The evacuation was the largest movement of people in the history of any species, and it happened with a speed that shocked the entire galactic Concord. Within 60 days, every human had left Concord space, boarding massive colony ships and heading toward the frontier veil. Concord monitoring stations watched the exodus with growing unease. Thousands of ships poured through the designated transit corridor, carrying 12 billion souls into the void between galactic arms. Families huddled together in cramped quarters. Children pressed their faces against windows to watch familiar stars fade away. And old people wept for homes they would never see again. Then something unexpected happened. The last human ship through the corridor launched a series of demolition charges, and the stable wormhole The connected Concord space to the frontier collapsed in a brilliant flash of light. It would take decades to rebuild, maybe longer. The message was clear. We are not coming back. And do not try to follow us. High Arbiter Varthelion declared the Exile a complete success. And for a time, the Galactic Concord celebrated. The threat had been eliminated without a single battle, without a single casualty. And the natural order of things had been preserved. But as the months passed, the celebration gave way to curiosity. And curiosity gave way to concern. Intelligence agencies across the Concord began sending probes into the frontier, trying to learn what had become of the exiled humans. Each probe vanished without a trace, not destroyed, but simply gone. As if it had never existed, long-range telescopes scanned the darkness beyond the veil, searching for any sign of human activity. They found nothing. No colony lights, no drive signatures, no communication signals of any kind. They are dead, the analysts assured the Grand Assembly. The outer dark is merciless and unforgiving. They had no supply lines, no infrastructure, no allies. They could not have survived more than a year. Varthelion accepted this explanation gladly, and he ordered the history books to be updated. Humanity would be remembered as a cautionary tale, a young species that had reached too far too fast and paid the ultimate price. The 9 species who had voted against exile were quietly pushed to the margins of Concord politics. Their representatives were given smaller offices. Their trade agreements were renegotiated on less favorable terms, and their opinions were politely ignored. But Elder Kethmari of the Voss refused to accept the official story. She was old even by Voss standards. Her gray skin wrinkled and her movements slow, but her mind remained sharp as a blade. She had spent 40 years studying humans, longer than any other alien scholar, and she knew things about them that the rest of the Concord had never bothered to learn. In her private chambers on the Voss homeworld, she reviewed all the available data about the human exodus, and what she found troubled her deeply. The evacuation had been too smooth, too organized, too fast. A panicked species fleeing into the unknown would have shown signs of chaos and desperation. But the humans had moved with military precision. Every ship had known exactly where to go and what to do. And there was something else. Something the intelligence analysts had overlooked in their eagerness to declare victory before the exile vote. Humanity had been exporting vast quantities of raw materials from their colonies, more than they could possibly need for their own use. Those materials had to have gone somewhere. Kethmari pulled up shipping records from the past decade and began tracing the movement of goods. Iron, titanium, rare earth elements, fusion fuel, all flowing out of human space in a steady stream. She traced the shipments to a series of shell companies and fake destinations, peeling back layer after layer of deception until she finally found the truth hidden beneath. For at least 10 years before the exile vote, humanity had been secretly stockpiling resources beyond the frontier veil. They had known the exile was coming, perhaps even planned for it, and they had prepared accordingly. Kethmari sat back in her chair and felt a chill run down her spine. The humans had played the Concord like a musical instrument, using alien arrogance and fear to achieve exactly what they wanted. They are not dead, she whispered to herself in the quiet of her chambers. They are building. She considered sharing her findings with the Grand Assembly, but what would be the point? Varthelion and his allies would dismiss her theories as the paranoid fantasies of an old woman who had grown too attached to her research subjects. Instead, she began making her own preparations. She reached out to the other 8 species who had voted against exile, sharing her suspicions through encrypted channels. Most of them were skeptical, but a few agreed that something strange was happening beyond the veil together. They formed a secret council dedicated to monitoring the frontier and preparing for whatever came next. Years passed, and the silence from beyond the veil continued. The Concorde grew complacent, and even Kathmari began to wonder if she had been wrong then. In the 5th year after the Exile, a Drathvi hunting fleet appeared in the Seraph Nebula. The Drathvi were slavers, vicious predators who operated beyond Concorde law and preyed on the weak. They had been a problem for centuries, but the Concorde had never found the political will to deal with them properly. This particular fleet had cornered a vast medical convoy carrying 200 civilians, doctors and nurses, on a mercy mission to a plague-stricken colony. They had no weapons, no defenses, no hope. The Drathvi commander was composing his ransom demands when his tactical officer began screaming. Ships appeared out of nowhere, emerging from some kind of dimensional fold that Concorde science said was impossible. They were unlike anything in any database, angular and brutal, covered in weapons and armor that seemed to shift and change as the Drathvi sensors tried to lock on. The battle lasted 90 seconds. 17 Drathvi warships became expanding clouds of debris, torn apart by weapons that moved too fast to track. The mysterious ships moved in perfect coordination, anticipating every Drathvi maneuver and countering it before it could even begin. When it was over, the vast convoy floated untouched amid the wreckage of their would-be captors. A transmission came through on an open channel, and every being in the convoy heard a human voice speak words that would soon echo across the galaxy. Voss Medical Convoy 7. This is the human naval vessel Defiance. You voted for us, and we remember. Safe travels. The ships vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving no trace except the wreckage of the Drathvi fleet and the stunned survivors of the convoy. The convoy commander downloaded her sensor logs and sent them directly to Elder Kathmari. Just as the Elder had instructed years ago, Kathmari watched the recordings 17 times, studying every detail of the mysterious human ships. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, built for war in a manner that the peaceful Voss could barely comprehend. But what struck her most was not the ships themselves. It was the message: you voted for us, and we remember. The humans had been watching. They had been waiting. They knew exactly who their friends were, and they had come to protect them. Kathmari looked out her window at the stars and wondered what else humanity remembered within a week. Every intelligence service in the Concorde had a copy of the sensor logs. Within a month, the Grand Assembly was in an uproar. Within a year, High Arbiter Vothelion had stopped sleeping. The silence was over. Humanity was coming back. And they were not the same species the Concorde had exiled 5 years ago. They were something new, something stronger, something that the galaxy had never seen before, and they remembered everything. The news spread across the Galactic Concorde like wildfire, and within days everyone from the highest diplomat to the lowest dock worker was talking about the mysterious human ships that had destroyed the Drathvi fleet intelligence. Analysts worked around the clock trying to understand what they had seen, but the sensor data raised more questions than it answered. The human ships used drive systems that should have been impossible, weapons that defied known physics, an armor that seemed to repair itself in real time. This is not natural evolution, the chief analyst told the Grand Assembly in a secret session. No species can advance this quickly. They must have found something beyond the veil, some kind of ancient technology or alien ally. High Arbiter Vythorn dismissed these concerns with a wave of his 4 arms. One battle proves nothing, he declared. They caught the Drathvi by surprise with a few prototype ships. It will not happen again. But it did happen again. And again, over the next 6 months. Human ships appeared throughout the frontier regions, always targeting Drathvi slavers and always protecting the innocent. They struck without warning and vanished without a trace, leaving nothing behind but wreckage and grateful survivors. The Drathvi were not a formal member of the Concorde, but they had powerful friends among the older species. When their leadership demanded action, Berthelion felt pressure to respond. "Send a diplomatic envoy," he ordered. "Find out what the humans want and make them understand they cannot simply appear in our space and start destroying ships." The envoy never returned. Their ship was found drifting near the frontier veil, completely intact but empty. There was no sign of violence, no indication of what had happened to the crew. There was only a message carved into the bulkhead in standard galactic script. "We told you not to follow." Berthelion was furious. But he was also afraid, and fear made him dangerous. "Prepare a battle fleet," he commanded. "If the humans want war, we will give them war." But before the fleet could launch, something happened that changed everything. The Drathvi homeworld received a transmission on every frequency simultaneously, cutting through every communication channel and broadcasting. A message that every being on the planet could hear. "People of Drathva, this is Admiral Marcus Chun of the Terran Compact. For centuries, your leaders have raided peaceful worlds and enslaved innocent people. This ends today. You have 1 hour to release all captives and surrender all warships. Those who comply will be allowed to live in peace. Those who resist will face the consequences of their choices. The hour begins now." The Drathvi government laughed at the threat. They had the largest fleet in the frontier regions and orbital defense platforms that could destroy any attacking force. No human fleet could possibly challenge their homeworld. Admiral Chun proved them wrong. Human ships appeared in orbit by the thousands. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands, each one bristling with weapons and moving in perfect coordination. They did not attack immediately, but simply waited, forming a ring of steel around the planet. The hour passed, and the Drathvi had not surrendered. Their fleet launched to meet the invaders, confident in their superior numbers and their knowledge of local space. The battle lasted 3 days. Later historians would call it the liberation of Drathva. But those who lived through it called it something else. They called it the reckoning. Human ships fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They used tactics that seemed suicidal, but somehow worked perfectly, sacrificing drones and unmanned vessels to protect crewed ships, overwhelming enemy formations with sheer numbers while their AI systems calculated firing solutions faster than any organic brain could process. The Drathvi defense platforms fell one by one, their shields overwhelmed by coordinated strikes from hundreds of ships firing at exactly the same moment. The Drathvi fleet tried to retreat, but human ships appeared behind them, cutting off escape routes and forcing them into a shrinking pocket of space. When the last Drathvi warship surrendered, Admiral Chun broadcast another message to the planet below. "Your military is defeated and your leaders are in custody. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to free those you have enslaved." Human landing craft descended on every slave camp on the planet, and what they found there would haunt the soldiers for the rest of their lives. 40,000 beings from 12 different species, many of them citizens of Concord member worlds, held in conditions that defied description. They were freed, every single one of them, and human medical teams worked for weeks treating injuries and diseases that the Drathvi had allowed to fester. The Concord could not ignore this grand assembly. Sessions became shouting matches as delegates demanded to know how this had happened. How had humans built such a powerful fleet in just 5 years? How had they developed technology that surpassed anything in Concord space? What else were they capable of? Berthelion tried to maintain control, but his authority was crumbling. The species who had supported Exile were now questioning their decision, and the 9 who had voted against it were no longer willing to stay silent. Elder Kethmari rose to address the assembly, her gray robes flowing around her thin body as she walked to the central podium. She was not supposed to speak without permission, but no one tried to stop her. 5 years ago, we voted to send humanity into the darkness to die, she said, her voice carrying through the massive chamber. We told ourselves it was for the good of the galaxy, but it was not. It was fear, pure and simple. We were afraid of what they might become, so we tried to destroy them before they had the chance. She paused and looked around at the assembled delegates. Now we know what they became, and it is exactly what we feared. They are stronger than us, faster than us, more adaptable than us. They have done in 5 years what took our civilizations thousands of years to achieve. But here is what I want you to notice. She continued. They did not attack us. They did not come seeking revenge for the exile. They came from the Drathvi, the slavers, the ones who prey on the weak and innocent. They came for our enemies, not for us. And when they freed those 40,000 slaves, do you know what many of them said? They said the humans treated them with kindness. They said the humans gave them food and medicine and asked nothing in return. They said the humans wept with them and promised to take them home. This is not the behavior of a species that wants to destroy us. This is the behavior of a species that wants to prove something. She turned to face Verthelion directly. They want to prove that we were wrong about them. And they are succeeding. The chamber erupted in arguments. Delegates shouting at each other across the vast space. But Kefmari simply walked back to her platform and sat down. She had said what needed to be said. The rest was up to the assembly 3 days later. A single human ship appeared at the edge of Concord space and broadcast a simple message. Ambassador Elena Vasquez requests permission to address the Grand Assembly. Verthelion wanted to refuse, but he no longer had the votes to stop it. Too many delegates were curious. Too many wanted answers. Too many had begun to wonder if the exile had been a terrible mistake. Permission was granted, and humanity was about to return to the place where they had been cast out. But this time, they would not be coming as supplicants begging for a place among the stars. They would be coming as equals. And the galaxy would have to decide whether to accept them or face the consequences. The balance of power was about to shift, and nothing would ever be the same again. The shuttle descended through the clouds of Thesser Prime, and Ambassador Elena Vasquez watched through the window as the capital city came into view below. It looked exactly as she remembered it, all gleaming spires and floating platforms. A monument to 12,000 years of galactic civilization, but Elena was not the same woman who had left this world 5 years ago. She was harder now, her face lined with the stress of leading a civilization through its darkest and brightest hours. Her hands bore scars from manual labor during the early days of exile, when every person had to contribute to survival. Her eyes held knowledge of things that would give the Concord nightmares. The shuttle landed at the same dock she had departed from on the day of the exile vote, and she walked down the ramp to find a delegation of Concord officials waiting for her. They looked nervous, and they should have been. Ambassador Vasquez, the lead official said, his voice carefully neutral. Welcome back to Thesser Prime. The assembly is ready to receive you. Elena nodded and followed them through the familiar corridors. But this time, there was no crowd of hostile diplomats watching her with contempt. Instead, beings of every species stopped to stare as she passed, whispering to each other in a dozen different languages. She heard fragments of their conversations. Is that really her? She looks different somehow. Did you see the footage from Drathva? The Grand Assembly Hall loomed ahead, and Elena paused at the entrance to take a deep breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment everything had been building toward. The massive doors opened, and she walked inside. The hall was packed. Every platform occupied. Every species represented. Even delegations that normally sent junior officials had dispatched their most senior leaders. This was the most important session in decades. And everyone knew it. High Arbiter Verthelion stood at the central podium, his forearms folded across his chest and his yellow eyes blazing with barely contained fury. He had fought hard against allowing this address, but the assembly had overruled him for the first time in his long career. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, his voice cold. You have been granted permission to speak. Say what you came to say. Elena walked to the visitor's podium, the same one where she had stood 5 years ago to receive the sentence of exile. She looked up at the assembled delegates and saw fear in many of their eyes. Good. They should be afraid, but not for the reasons they imagined. Thank you. High Arbiter, she began, her voice calm and clear. I remember this hall very well. I remember standing here and listening as you listed humanity's crimes against your precious galactic order. I remember watching the votes turn red, one after another, condemning 12 billion people to what you believed would be certain death. She paused to let her words sink in. I remember smiling when the vote was announced, and I remember the confusion on your faces. You expected me to beg and plead and cry. You expected humans to act the way every other young species had acted when faced with the might of the Concord. You did not understand us then, and I suspect many of you still do not understand us now. Holographic displays appeared behind her, showing images of the Terran Compact's territory. 47 habitable worlds orbiting dozens of stars. Massive shipyards producing fleets that rivaled anything in Concord space. Cities rising from planets that had been barren wastelands just years before. This is what we built while you were celebrating our extinction, Elena said. 47 worlds, 15 billion people, the most advanced technology in the known galaxy. We did this in 5 years, with no help from anyone, starting from nothing but the supplies we could carry. The delegates stared at the images in disbelief. Several of them began asking questions, but Elena held up her hand for silence. I am not here to threaten you, she continued. I am not here to demand revenge for what you did to us. That would be a waste of time and resources. And we have better things to do. I am here to tell you that the Terran Compact exists, that we are a sovereign galactic power, and that we intend to take our place among the stars whether the Concord approves or not. Vithelion stepped forward, his yellow eyes narrowing. You speak of sovereignty, but you have been attacking ships in our space. You destroyed an entire Drathve fleet and invaded their homeworld. These are acts of war. Elena turned to face him directly. The Drathve are not members of the Concord. They are slavers and pirates who have preyed on your people for centuries while you did nothing. We freed 40,000 slaves from their camps, including citizens of 12 Concord member species. If that is an act of war, then I am proud to be a warrior. A murmur swept through the assembly, and Elena noticed several delegates nodding in agreement. Let me make something clear, she said, raising her voice to be heard over the whispers. We are not here to conquer anyone. We have no interest in ruling the Concord or forcing our ways on your civilizations. We have plenty of space to grow and plenty of work to do in our own territory, but we will not be pushed around either. Any species that threatens humanity or our allies will learn very quickly that we are no longer the weak, young race you thought you could exile without consequences. She turned to look at the 9 platforms, where the species that had voted against exile sat watching her with intense interest. To the Voss, the Kethrani, and the 7 other species who stood with us when no one else would. We have not forgotten your kindness. The Terran Compact would be honored to call you friends and allies. Our borders are open to your ships. Our markets are open to your trade. And our protection is yours if you ever need it. Elder Kathmari rose from her platform, her gray face showing an expression that might have been a smile. On behalf of the Voss Collective, I accept your offer of friendship. We believed in humanity when others did not, and we are glad to see our faith was not misplaced. One by one, the other 8 species voiced their agreement, and Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest. These beings had risked their political standing to vote against exile, and now their courage was being rewarded. Vithelion watched this exchange with growing alarm. He could see the balance of power shifting before his eyes. and he knew he had to do something to stop it. "This is outrageous," he declared. "You cannot simply walk in here and form alliances without the approval of the full assembly. There are procedures, protocols, traditions that must be followed." Alina looked at him with something approaching pity. "High Arbiter, you use those procedures and protocols to exile us. You use those traditions to justify sending children into the void. Forgive me if I do not feel bound by the rules of an organization that tried to destroy my people." She stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to a level that was almost intimate. "You made a mistake 5 years ago. You looked at humanity and saw a threat that needed to be eliminated. You should have seen an opportunity that needed to be embraced. We could have been your greatest allies. Instead, you made us find our own way. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice." She stepped back and addressed the assembly one final time. "The Terran Compact is establishing an embassy on Lesser Prime. Any species that wishes to open diplomatic relations is welcome to contact us. Any species that wishes to join the Compact as a full member is also welcome. Though we understand that is a larger decision. We are building something new beyond the frontier veil. Something based on cooperation and mutual respect rather than hierarchy and control. We think it is a better way of organizing civilization, and we invite anyone who agrees to join us. The choice is yours." She walked out of the chamber without looking back, just as she had done 5 years ago. But this time, the silence behind her was not the silence of contempt. It was the silence of a galaxy realizing that everything it knew had just changed. Rathelion watched her go, and for the first time in his long career, he felt truly powerless. He had tried to destroy humanity, and instead he had created something that might one day destroy everything he had built. The vote had been 38-9, and he had thought that was a victory. Now he understood it had been the beginning of the end. The transformation of the galaxy did not happen overnight, but it happened faster than anyone had expected. Within 6 months of Ambassador Vasquez's address to the Grand Assembly, 19 species had formally petitioned to join the Terran Compact. Some were members of the Concord who had grown tired of the old ways, while others were independent civilizations that had never been powerful enough to challenge the established order. The 9 species who had voted against humanity's exile were welcomed as founding partners of the new alliance, given equal voices in the Compact's governing council, and access to all the technological advances humanity had achieved during their years beyond the Veil. Elder Kethmari of the Voss became the first non-human ambassador to New Geneva, the Compact's capital city on a world that humans had terraformed from a frozen wasteland into a thriving garden. She arrived expecting to find a military society hardened by years of struggle, and instead found something that surprised her deeply. The humans had built schools and hospitals before they built warships. They had created parks and museums and concert halls before they created military bases. They had somehow managed to advance their civilization in every direction at once, not sacrificing culture and beauty for the sake of survival. "How did you do this?" she asked Chancellor Vasquez, who had given up her ambassador title to lead the Compact's civilian government. "How did you build so much in so little time?" Vasquez smiled and led her to a window overlooking the city below, where humans and aliens walked together through streets lined with trees from a dozen different worlds. "When you have nothing, you have to prioritize what matters most," she explained. "We could have spent all our resources on weapons and defenses, but we knew that would only create a civilization worth dying for, not one worth living in. So we built both. We built the ships to protect ourselves, and we built the cities to remind ourselves what we were protecting. Every time one of our soldiers looks at a child playing in a park or an artist painting in a studio, they remember why they fight." Kethmari nodded slowly, beginning to understand. The Concord builds from fear, she said. You build from hope. We build from stubbornness, Vasquez corrected her with a laugh. We were told we would die in the darkness, and we refused. We were told we would never see the stars again, and we built ships to prove them wrong. We were told we were not good enough to be part of galactic civilization, and we decided to build a better one in the Grand Assembly on Lesser Prime. The situation was growing desperate. Species were leaving the Concord in increasing numbers, drawn by the Compact's promise of equality and cooperation. Trade revenues were falling as merchants found better deals in Compact territory. The old alliances were crumbling. High Arbiter Verthilion called emergency session after emergency session, trying to stem the tide, but nothing he did seemed to work. Every speech he gave, every policy he proposed, only seemed to drive more species away. The final blow came when the Kethrani, one of the oldest and most respected species in the Concord, announced they were withdrawing their membership to join the Compact. We have been part of the Concord for 8,000 years, the Kethrani delegate told the assembly. We have served faithfully and followed the rules and supported the established order. But we cannot support an organization that exiles innocent people for the crime of growing too quickly. The Compact offers something the Concord never has: a chance for every species to reach its full potential without fear of being punished for success. We would be fools not to accept that offer. More species followed, and within 2 years, the Concord had lost nearly half its members. Those who remained were mostly the older, more conservative species who feared change above all else. Verthilion watched his life's work collapse around him, and he could not understand what had gone wrong. He had done everything correctly, followed every tradition, enforced every rule. How could everything fall apart so quickly? The answer came to him late one night as he sat alone in his private chambers. Reviewing the records of the Exile vote from 7 years ago, he had been so certain that humanity was a threat that needed to be eliminated, so confident that the galaxy would be better off without them. He had never stopped to consider that he might be wrong, that his fear might have blinded him to other possibilities. And now it was too late. A message arrived on his personal terminal, marked with the seal of the Terran Compact. He opened it expecting threats or demands, but instead found a simple invitation. Chancellor Elena Vasquez requested the honor of his presence at a diplomatic summit on New Geneva. All former Concord leaders were invited to discuss the future of galactic cooperation. Verthilion wanted to refuse, to throw the invitation away and pretend he had never received it. But some part of him knew that refusing would only make things worse. He accepted. The summit was held in a magnificent hall, built specifically for the occasion, with delegates from over 60 species gathered to discuss trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and cultural exchange programs. It was exactly the kind of gathering the Concord used to host. But the atmosphere was entirely different. There was no hierarchy here. Senior species looking down on junior ones. Everyone sat at the same level, spoke with the same voice, was treated with the same respect. It was chaotic and messy and inefficient. But it was also somehow more alive than anything Verthilion had experienced in centuries. Chancellor Vasquez found him standing alone near a window, looking out at the alien stars. You came, she said, her voice neutral. I was not sure you would. I had to see for myself, he replied. I had to understand how you did what you did. She stood beside him, and for a long moment they were silent together. I do not expect you to apologize, she finally said. What you did to us was terrible, but I have come to believe it was also necessary. The exile forced us to become what we needed to be. Without that pressure, we might have stayed comfortable and complacent forever. You are thanking me? Verthilion asked, incredulous. No, she said firmly. I am acknowledging reality. What you did was wrong, but good came from it anyway. That is the nature of the universe. Suffering can lead to growth if we choose to let it. She turned to face him directly. The question now is what you will choose to do. The Concorde is dying, and you can either let it collapse or you can help transform it into something better. The Compact has room for everyone, even those who once voted against us. Berthelion felt something shift inside him, something he had not felt in a very long time. It might have been hope, or it might have been shame. He was not sure. "Why would you offer this to me?" he asked. "I tried to destroy your people, because holding grudges is exhausting," Vasquez replied with a slight smile. "Because the galaxy has enough enemies without us creating more. Because I would rather have you as a reluctant ally than a bitter opponent. And because, despite everything, I believe you were acting out of fear rather than malice. Fear can be overcome. Malice cannot." The summit continued for 3 more days, and by the end of it, the framework for a new galactic order had been established. The Concorde would not be dissolved, but would be reformed, merged with the Compact into something entirely new. They called it the Stellar Commonwealth, and it was built on principles that would have seemed impossible just a decade earlier. True equality among species, freedom to develop without artificial restrictions, cooperation rather than hierarchy, respect rather than fear. Berthelion did not become a leader in the new order, but he did become an advisor, using his centuries of experience to help younger diplomats navigate the complex web of interstellar relations. It was a humbler role than he was used to, but he found it strangely satisfying. Elder Kethmari became the first speaker of the Commonwealth Council, chosen by unanimous vote as a symbol of the alliance between humanity and its oldest friends. She served with wisdom and grace until her natural death. Many years later, Chancellor Vasquez eventually retired from politics and became a teacher, training the next generation of human leaders in the skills they would need to guide their people through the challenges ahead. She was remembered as the woman who had smiled in the face of exile and led humanity to its greatest triumph, and humanity itself. They continued to grow, to explore, to question, to dream. They built wonders that amazed the galaxy and made mistakes that embarrassed them. They were stubborn and curious and sometimes reckless, but they were also kind and brave and endlessly creative. They had been told they did not belong among the stars, and they had proven that they belonged everywhere. The rulers had voted to exile Earth, and humans had not waited to be told twice. They had taken that exile and turned it into freedom, turned that darkness into light, turned that death sentence into a new beginning, and the galaxy was better for it. Because in the end, it was not about revenge or power or proving the doubters wrong. It was about becoming the best version of themselves and helping others do the same. That was what humanity had learned in the darkness beyond. The veil, that was what they had brought back to the stars. That was their gift to the galaxy that had tried to destroy them, and it was only the beginning.